Thank you, Constance. Hi, everyone. The initial title of my talk was There is no AI, but it would have been too dramatic for an AI conference, so I decided to go with dropping the A from AI. Now, since this is going to be a very short talk, in the next few minutes, I'll talk about kind of a new definition of intelligence, along with a few of its impacts by giving you two examples. So here's how we start. I'm claiming that intelligence is nothing but an observer experience. To explain that, let's start with an example. Let's say you are at a corporate event, well, definitely pre-COVID, and you notice people gathered in a corner where Steve, who's the guy in the middle with a hat in his hand, is drawing a lot of attention. When you get there, you hear Steve shouting, "Anyone, give me a number and I would divide it by 91. Someone says 17. Then Steve looks up at the ceiling and starts 1.2, 8, 5, 7, 1. The crowd already starts clapping as he continues 4, 2, 8. And you could hear someone saying, "Wow, he's a genius." And your friend next to you says, "That's amazing. I think his IQ goes through the roof." And you tell him, yeah, he should be a savant or something. Only they have that level of intelligence. So later that day, you go out to dinner with your wife, Sarah, where you tell her about your experience. And she tells you that, "Tom, but that's a famous math trick." To which you reply, so that was just a stupid trick? Okay, so what is the moral of the story? If you think about it, Tom went from one end of the spectrum, which is Steve is a genius, to another side of Steve did a stupid trick. So in our story, Tom is an observer. And this is to show that if the point of view of the observer changes, something that used to be seen as bearing a certain level of intelligence might be seen as more or less intelligent. Therefore, intelligence can be defined, measured, and attributed only from an observer point of view. So, if the central point is the observer, we wouldn't have two classes of artificial intelligence and natural intelligence. We will have only one class, which is observers' experienced intelligence. So, let's go to the next one. Intelligence as an experience is not explainable, but yet transferable. So now if we assume that intelligence is an experience, it would be no different than any other experiences, such as riding a bike. Many of us at some point might have tried to teach our kids how to ride a bike. And although we know how to do it ourselves, teaching it is not that straightforward. You usually hold the bike seat and rest your hand on the back of their neck to help them steady, then get them to start pedaling. But the question is, can you write a complete and a specific set of steps so that someone can read and perform riding? The simple answer is no. It wouldn't be possible. And whatever that we write will be an incomplete description of what riding a bike might feel like or might look like to us as observers, as opposed to an explanation of what is really happening inside us that makes the whole thing work. Then how is it transferred? Well, in two ways: interpretation and what I call high coverage mimicry. What does it mean? Your kid could follow your interpretation of riding a bike because you're telling them, hold the handlebars, look ahead of you, keep your balance, and so on. Or they do a high coverage mimicry, which is basically trying to repeat whatever they see you do when you are riding a bike. So basically, the mimicry would be a simple repetition of a sequence of actions observed during the experience while keeping the environment as close as possible to the initial setting of the original experience. Now, in mimicry, we hope for two things. One is to create an impression in the audience that is similar to the original experience, which you could think of it as, oh, I'm faking riding a bike. Or to create an opportunity to extract your own interpretation of what riding a bike is. By the way, these days no AI talk can be complete if you don't mention deep learning. And as you might have guessed, deep learning falls into the high coverage mimicry. Okay, so the time is short. I will talk about some of the impacts of this kind of new view of intelligence. And the most obvious one is that it shifts the focus from technology to the outcome. This means that as long as the outcome is perceived as intelligent, the source is not important. And this is actually contrary to the current popular view that, well, we hear people saying, oh, that company is using fake AI. What I'm saying is that that is absolutely not important. In fact, a company might decide to put 1 million monkeys behind typewriters, and based on the monkey theory, eventually they can generate a Romeo and Juliet. Now, while it can take them more than 1 billion years to create that book, it took Shakespeare about 2 to 3 years to do that, which, as you guessed, looks more intelligent because the same outcome was achieved with fewer resources utilized, basically. So what we are saying is that intelligence can be measured. How? As the difference between the perceived performance of the current observation against the previous ones. Now that is obviously subjective because people have different previous observations. So how do we go around that? It's just like going to movies. Some people like the movie, others don't. We just need to let them debate and report their experience. So as long as a diverse majority of our audience reports positively, we know that we have successfully created an experience of intelligence. So one maybe last important thing is that if you have a company and you're telling your end users that you're using AI because you think that it matters to them, well, this is how you could measure that now. The time is up. Maybe one last impact, which could be the biggest impact, is the one on my precious titles, which all have AI in them. But the cool thing is that my email doesn't have AI in it, and it will not change. And I'm always excited to discuss this topic and similar ones around intelligence. So feel free to reach me on my email or on LinkedIn. Thank you for your time.